All right, I think we have enough folks joining, and we'll have a few more filtering in over the next few minutes. But let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm looking forward to presenting our third webinar topic for you all. For this webinar, we'll talk through how you can improve your service and productivity with Pulsa. One thing to note for this session is it's really heavily geared towards distributors of gas and industrial products, although it also can be very interesting for end customers and users of the Pulsa platform to understand how they can make use of Pulsa to make their operation more efficient as well. For folks who I've not spoken with before, my name is Sam Fatui, and I head up business development at Pulsa. I'm also joined here by our sales manager, Jamie, and our CEO, Dave, here is on the call as well. Before jumping into the session, I'd like to note that this is the third in a series of 3 planned webinars over the past 3 weeks. The first webinar focused on optimizing end-to-end operations with Pulsa. In that session, we provided an overview of really telemetry across bulk and packaged gases, and described a series of technical, operational, and financial improvements that Pulsa has implemented to enable telemetry, of course, to work across all asset types, not just bulk tanks. Last week, we had a webinar with a more detailed overview of all the sensors and software that Pulsa offers. We described the hardware capabilities of each sensor and also showed off our software platform and some of the latest innovations that we've made there. We've recorded both of those sessions. You can see the videos for those webinars in the links here in this presentation. And also, I'll be sending out an email to all the attendees with the link here. And I'll also be likely later this week, we'll send out an email newsletter with all the links that you can share with your team as well. And after this webinar, similar to the last couple of weeks, we'll send out a link with all of the attendees, for a link to all the attendees with a recording of this webinar and the slides as well. Let's jump to the next slide. So let's talk about today's content. First, I'll just do a quick, really recap introduction of Pulsa, our company and products. Then I'll really go into various delivery models for industrial gases and how to optimize Pulsa regardless of which model you're using. I'll share some data from our case studies. I'll go out with the rollout plans that we've seen customers adopt for the Pulsa system, and I'll leave some time open at the end for Q&A. I'd like to do a very quick introduction. We've gone through a lot of these topics over the last couple of weeks, but for folks who haven't attended, maybe to spend a couple minutes talking about the platform. We are a leading industrial gas telemetry company, and we have several different wireless solutions in market. We have a great differential pressure sensor, which works great on your bulk tanks. These work great on any bulk, micro bulk, anything that basically has a gauge that reaches inches or in weight. That sensor is going to work great on those. That's a small differential pressure sensor, completely wireless. We have a couple of weight platforms. We have a heavy duty weight platform for powder coated steel, which can support several thousand pounds. It's purpose built for liquid tanks like BevCarb CO2, any of your liquefied argon, oxygen, nitrogen, helium, and other gas and blends and dewars. We also have another weight platform that is plastic and can support several hundred pounds. This is great for CO2 cylinders, nitrous, chemcane, ammonia, and any other products that you measure with weight. And the first sensor that we released in market is our high pressure sensor, fits in the palm of your hand and connects to a cylinder via a 1/4-inch MPT port. This is great for spec gases in any situation really where you have a manifold. It's a slam dunk to deploy this particular sensor. All these sensors have a 5 to 8 year battery life, are completely wireless, and work well, are basically weatherproof to work outside. They communicate via cellular towers and work across all different cellular providers out of the box. There's no provisioning or anything. This includes Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, Sprint, and all bands, which includes 4G, 3G, 2G. Everything works out of the box. You don't have to tell us the wireless provider or anything like that. I went into a lot more detail on the sensor hardware and software platform on last week's webinar, and which you can watch online if you haven't seen it yet. And we also have a lot of product information available online, and feel free to give us a call with any questions. We build everything in-house. We have our own in-house software and hardware development team, and typically release software and frequently hardware every 6 weeks. We just released a major software update a couple of weeks back and have another one coming out probably next week. And one of the nice things about full ownership of our hardware is supply chain resilience. For example, in the past few weeks, we've had an increasing amount of demand for oxygen clean sensors, which we have been able to build and source and are ready in inventory. Similarly, some of components of our supply chain, some providers weren't able to meet our customer needs, and we were able to shift off to different providers across the world, including in the United States, basically whoever can provide us with our hardware. Since we own the hardware platform, we're able to get that hardware in our inventory very quickly. And we're currently working with roughly about a little bit over 100 distributors in the United States and North America as a whole. You know, I'd like to start, so this particular topic, I'd like to start about the concerns we have from the field regarding deploying Pulsa at scale. And really, our goal today is to address a lot of these concerns through this discussion and the Q&A at the end and ongoing conversations. And essentially, the goal here is that this is the start of a conversation with everybody here. Most of these concerns often center as really kind of a push and a pull between sales and operations at a distributor. Often sales are the ones that are talking to the customers, and sales teams and any sales organization, when a sales team is provided with a product, they're incentivized to sell that product and make a profit on the equipment and make sure that also their end customers are happy and continue to use their general services, right? So in this case, of course, gas supply or industrial supplies. And the operations folks want to make sure that the customer is happy, provided a high level of service, but not breaking the bank, making sure that the customer is happy at the highest level of efficiency possible. What this leads to, what we've seen is kind of an approach where folks, a few people actually brought this up with us, this metaphor where folks are kind of stepping on dollars to pick up pennies. Because what we've seen is distributors sometimes have good success selling a few sensors every month, charging their end customer a decent markup, and everyone's happy. There's a product that the customer likes, there's a product that the distributor likes, and people are in general happy. In that scenario, as we'll discuss through this conversation, both really the distributors and end customers aren't taking full advantage and benefit of the platform. And let's jump into a little bit more now. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time focused in the coming presentation, focused on the economics of Pulsa. But to be frank, really, our distributors and end gas customers who most appreciate the benefits of Pulsa and constantly are calling us and ordering new sensors, they rarely lead those conversations discussing purely the economic benefits. They constantly talk about one customer or particular customers who almost ran out, or things that they were able to catch, or just because they now have the peace of mind with eyes on the ground, it opens up a whole new level of service and capabilities that distributors and end customers just didn't have before they were able to deploy Pulsa. As we all know, there's really two main different delivery models for gas and industrial goods, call-in orders and what commonly referred to in the industry as milk runs. We know that there's some hybrid type models used, but really kind of wanted to categorize both of these models, most deliveries in these two types of models. One common model is when customers call in an order when they're running low, distributor receives that order and then schedules a delivery, call-in orders. The challenges there are typically that gas supply is often one of the last things that gas users are concerned about, and they don't constantly check the values. And of course, there could be leaks or irregular consumption that they would never check. This either leads to stockouts for the end customer, emergency delivery requests from the distributor, and overall unhappy customers and distributors. Also, customers may place an order at an inopportune time, essentially, for the distributor when they have no plans to send a car out in that, or a truck out in that time frame, and they have to go outside their regular delivery zone and timing to satisfy and meet the customer requirement. Another common model is commonly referred to in the industry as milk run. This just means that the distributor will swap out inventory periodically based on some estimate of the customer's consumption. Without visibility of customer levels, though, this can be very inefficient. We're often seeing that distributors visit their customers, let's say 2 times as frequently as required to really resupply them. And that's actually kind of general industry numbers that we're seeing for different product types, whether it's CO2, spec gas, everything. It typically is distributors going out probably 2 times as often on average as needing to visit a customer. Also, customers can change their consumption patterns without the distributor knowledge, and same, even if distributors has been over-servicing them, customers can still run out because distributors have no eye on the ground of what's happening there. And unfortunately, as noted, in both these models, customers can run out of gas and require an emergency delivery. Let's start with the call-in orders and how you can use Pulsa to automate that. Pulsa can easily be used to effectively optimize this scenario. One of the most common ways that we've actually seen distributors deploy Pulsa to their end customers is through really a very affordable and automated reordering system. Now the customers no longer have to actually pay attention to their actual gas inventory and can just rely on Pulsa to provide notifications to their distributor for reorders. The distributor now has the benefit of automating the ticketing system with minimal administrative overhead required and avoiding any of those Friday night emergency calls with full inventory visibility and reducing the likelihood that the customer would consider moving their business elsewhere. The customer sees a big benefit of actually not monitoring their inventory and calling in orders. And frequently what we're seeing is that they're willing to pay something for that. And really, as we're talking about revenue, there's a point here about customers paying for this service, and often they will be willing to pay a nominal fee for this service. But when you look at it from the perspective of a distributor, Pulsa provides the peace of mind of remote inventory visibility and allows distributors to reduce administrative overhead of managing orders, provides a higher level of service, and cuts out emergency deliveries at less than the cost of a couple Starbucks coffees a month. Now let's pivot over to the milk run customers. And then afterwards, we're going to go into some topics that are general to all your types of customers. One opportunity that you can take advantage of is really transitioning your existing milk run customers to a fixed keep full type program. This type of program is very popular, and it's where the distributor charges their customer a consistent fee, fixed fee, every month with all delivery, gas, lease costs baked into one fee. The customer doesn't have to worry about price inconsistencies, price jumping, anything like that, and the distributor can essentially guarantee a fixed income through the year. The distributor now sees consistent revenue that has nothing to do with the customer stops and gets to earn all the benefits when they can optimize their distribution expenses. The customer also sees significant benefit by seeing stable, predictable gas costs and avoids unnecessary visits from their distributors where they might have to stop their operation to check gas levels and so forth. And of course, the distributor can protect themselves with some consumption caps if the customer goes way out of their previous consumption behavior. A final opportunity, and this is one that actually almost is what we see most commonly, is not really a model or business change and doesn't really require any customer buy-in. It's not any type of real transition, but what we've seen is that distributors, when they've implemented the Pulsa system without any contractual changes, they roughly experience a 50% improvement on average in their delivery operations when they implement Pulsa. For really a low monthly fee at every location, Pulsa can allow distributors to service more customers with the same truck, cut their visit frequency, and eliminate unnecessary stops while still providing a better level of service to their customer. And customers, while they don't need to buy in, they will also see the higher service level. And similarly, they're not going to look to leave a distributor who's bringing new innovative solutions to meet their gas slip needs and frankly, never allowing them to run out. One of the key inputs as we're talking about all the economic benefits here at Pulsa is the cost to stop. And you can imagine, and as everyone here who's looked at the P&L of truck stops, it varies significantly across regions, distributions, types of gas. Within one distributor, you might have in one area a significantly different cost to stop with another area and customer type. There's many variables in place: fuel costs, driver comp, parking tickets, tolls, vehicle maintenance costs. A lot of different things go into the cost to stop. The cheapest costs are, of course, in places with ample parking, many end customers, and very close vicinity where you can do many stops in a day. And the more expensive customers to visit are often ones in more remote areas or ones requiring tolls, double parking, things like that to visit. The cost to serve really goes across three major categories. One, of course, is the cost to employ a driver, which includes, of course, salary, fringe benefits, any type of insurance, licensing costs, those kind of things. These costs vary by geography, state, and demand. What we found interesting, the national average salary for a truck driver is roughly about $50K a year. But for example, you look at Walmart, their average driver salary is $90K. I imagine most of the folks in here are sitting in that kind of range of where they're compensating, or maybe somewhere in that range where they're compensating their driver, and that doesn't include benefits. The next category is really the cost of trucks and maintenance. Trucks are costing significantly, roughly in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for a new truck, and definitely tens of thousands of dollars to maintain these trucks annually. And then there's also the big bucket of gas, tickets, tolls, and everything really associated with driving a car and keeping it going. We pulled distributors across the country and have done a good amount of analysis on these numbers ourselves, and we found that the fully burdened cost of each stop for commercial vehicle, commercial truck, costs somewhere in the range of $40 to $100. With the most consistent, we're hearing typically in the 60s to 70s of dollars per stop. We know the range varies significantly. Now, this isn't just a visit with a fill, though. Stops themselves, just to check in on the customer levels, are also a cost for a distributor without any expected margin or revenue gain. One of the common points when we're going through this example, we hear from distributors as well: I've already invested in these assets, this truck, I expected to run it. but there's not one distributor in the country that we've talked to over the last couple of years who claims that they have not had open recs for drivers, bought new trucks to support their growing businesses. What this extra capacity allows to do that we've essentially quantified is allows you to keep operational costs consistent or decrease them while growing your expected business. And now, especially in this economic climate where there's a lot of uncertainty on if we're going to expect growth, see a recession, whatnot, we expect that all distributors will need to do more with potentially less capacity here. And we have the tools that can support that shift in a business approach. Ultimately, that we found is that purely a cost perspective, and this doesn't include all the other benefits that you see from the peace of mind of Pulsa, cutting out just 1 or 2 stops to each customer a year will easily pay for the cost of the Pulsa service and anything else that you can take advantage of with the real-time inventory visibility. Now, I'd like to go into a couple of case studies for customers, 2 kind of different customers who've used Pulsa. We've been working with this particular spec gas distributor and their team to optimize their supply chain and help them solve some of their major challenges at key customers. This particular customer distributor has a sizable industrial blended specialty gas business and running into issues supplying a segment of some of their most demanding manufacturing customers. They had a commitment to never run these customers out. This segment of, I think, a few dozens of their customers said, on average, said they'd be out $80,000 in any case of a stockout, one stockout happens. And so they were visiting these customers 3 times a week to make sure that they had their cylinder inventory up to date. After deploying Pulsa to these customers, the distributor was able to reduce those visits to less than once a week on average. These were people that are visiting 3 times a week on average before. Also, more importantly, their customer was significantly happier with the service provided and visibility from real-time gas monitoring. They estimate that they easily saved roughly $5,000 per account where they deployed Pulsa, and currently in the process of expanding their Pulsa coverage across the rest of their business. Here's another example in a completely different end customer segment. As many of you know, breweries are notoriously inconsistent with their CO2 consumption and often use up significant amounts of gas, CO2 gas, when they're brewing a new batch of beer. This distributor, who was going to many brewery customers, would visit them a couple times a month in order to avoid running them out making sure that the customer is never out before they brew a new batch of beer. Well, we all know CO2 tends to be relatively low margin with kind of a low revenue source. A big reason for these low margins is due to the high cost of serving these customers. This CO2 distributor was able to implement Pulse on their assets and cut their cost by close to $500 per customer per year. So we're talking about, I think roughly we're pushing hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings a year with Pulsa. Also, what's probably even more critical is these distributors were never worried calling these customers at the breweries were never worried about calling their distributor. Frequently, we understand that these customers were very worried about their levels and were frequently calling their distributors. Those calls stopped because now the distributor themselves has that same level of visibility that the distributor and the end customer have the same level of visibility as each other with the Pulsa platform. And note that all these numbers are based on delivery costs, but they don't include any potential revenue gains by passing billing on to customers, which, as I've talked about, often customers are willing to pay something because their service levels are significantly better. But the key point here is that the savings from a distributor perspective are real, and now the operational saving incentives and Pulsa costs are aligned in such a way that distributors can now increase profitability per account without even asking their customer to pay for their service. And the incentives now are definitely there where distributors would want to just deploy this without waiting for some kind of buy-in from their customer to pay something extra. One of the neat things about our platform, as you've heard earlier today and through our webinars, is that it's very affordable and simple to install, which makes evaluating Pulsa for deployment very easy. Really, we've seen distributors typically structure the deployment in 3 major steps. To start, they usually pick a handful of sensors to evaluate their solution. That's where they'll typically find a few customers that could be, let's say, challenging to service, folks who've called in a whole bunch of emergency deliveries, or a handful of customers on a specific truck route or region, and just deploy Pulsa there. At this stage, what's critical is really to evaluate the Pulsa platform and really put in place the metrics to be used to monitor the success of the program, the Pulsa program, which we can help with because we've gone through these stages with other distributors and we know what to look for in your ERP systems and so forth. The next stage is where distributors use Pulsa on a specific business, let's say. So for example, they might deploy Pulsa to all their fast food chains in a region or all their customers amongst the southern part of their footprint or their region or whatnot. What's critical here is that at this point, we work with a distributor to define the integration requirements and identify the steps in the standard operating process required for a go-forward deployment. At the next stage, we work with the distributor really to monitor metrics. Distributors are often updating their agreements when they're seeing the efficiency gains with Pulsa to say, we can provide you and customer this service at a lower cost with this particular solution, and move to, let's say, a fixed fee arrangement or some kind of different arrangement that weren't possible before they were actually deploying Pulsa with each installation. And both distributor and customer are able to see benefit of the productivity gains that are being experienced with Pulsa. And really, a closing thought here before I open up for questions is that while we can work with your teams, and this conversation is heavily about the economic and operational benefits of implementing Pulsa across your business, this isn't a tool that we've seen just help one part of your business. Your sales, your operation, your administrative, your driver support are all going to be more efficient and work better with Pulsa installed with your customers. Think about how much more time all the folks will have rather than dealing with last-minute calls, making emergency stock-out runs, things like that, that can focus on growing, streamlining your business rather than dealing with daily fire drills. And on that note, I left some time open for questions and discussion. There's a raise hand feature I think you can see on the screenshot here that you can use. You can either ask a question, I guess, down at the bottom. You can either ask a question via the chat window to myself or Jamie, or use the raise hand feature and unmute your microphone to directly ask the question. So I just wanted to kind of open up there, see if we have any Q&A.
All right. I got a question from Jana Rossman asking about our hazardous location certifications, saying, I missed the other webinars, and is Pulsa rated for hazardous locations?
Oh, that's great, Jana, that's a great question. Within, I believe we're working with Intertech now. And I don't know, Dave, are you still on the line? We
Yes,
might have lost Dave.
I'm here.
Dave, do you want to talk quickly about the Intertech process?
Sure. So we've started the process for all of our sensors. Right now we're looking at class 1 DIBS 2 for UL, and then the equivalents for ATEX and IECEX. And so our sensors should be able to go to those types of locations anywhere in the world. And we've finished the preliminary design review. We've been talking with them for probably 6 to 7 months. And I expect to start the testing in the next week or so. And then hopefully in 4 to 6 weeks, we'll finish the testing. And so it still is a work in progress, but the preliminary design review did not bring up any major issues that would jeopardize passing the certifications. And it's been something we wanted to do for a long time. And so we're finally moving forward with it. And I expect to have good news in the next couple of months.
Great question.
Sorry, let's see here. Yeah, opening up for other questions now.
I do see Q&A.
Tony Sobolewski, sorry, I probably just butchered that. Sorry, Tony. He said, what about using with 800-pound containers of R410A refrigerant?
Yeah, so the scales themselves, we have 2 different scale products. One is our smaller one, which I would suggest not using that. That's limited to about 250 feet for smaller components. Our scales can handle thousands of pounds. We actually can handle a point load of 8,000 pounds. The dimensions Tony, I'll have to link up with you offline, but we have 2 different scale platforms. One is a 2x2, and another is a 3x3. And we also, even if you go a little bit beyond that, you can have a little bit of overhang. It just depends on the dimensions of your product. But we have 2 different heavy duty scales that you can use to support thousands of pounds. So 800 pounds is well within the range. We commonly have folks using our scales for 750 pound CO2 doers. And so that's a very common, 800 pounds is well within the reach of what we need to do.
Extremely durable, it's powder coated steel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. We designed that for heavy duty weight products. So that's the idea of, it's great that you've got that use case, because that's something well within the specs of our sensors. I saw Chris Corkless had, oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, that answers his question there. Chris Corkless asked, if we had a giant rollout conversion, are you going to be converting these for us. Walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, so what we do is the software takes about 2 minutes to install a sensor. It's very quick and easy. I went through actually the process on the last webinar. The installation process takes minutes. When we're talking about giant rollouts, we can of course even fly out there and come visit your customers with you live if you have enough customers lined up. What we've gotten to the situation of though is basically distributors will usually work with us for the first installation, figuring out the specs and everything like that. And they'll just say, dude, we don't want you guys from California bothering us and slowing our flow down. We'll just go out and install it. So actually the nice thing is, and I think this is one thing that's different from some of the other solutions, you don't have to call us to set anything up. The hardware that we send to you, you install out of the box and it works. And essentially we provide support. And just depending on how many sensors you have and what kind of deployment you're doing, we can provide increased level support to based on what your needs are. The follow-up question from Chris is, can you walk through how weatherproof scales are in a wet? And actually, to speak to the earlier question there, we hold all of our inventory on stock as well. We hold a significant amount of inventory. We have partners. Siltech holds a good amount of inventory for us out in Illinois. When you have a need, we can ship hundreds of sensors out to you within the span of a day or two. And so that's how we can get that hardware to you and deploy it as needed rapidly, and especially in this economy and time. That's what we're working through there. Chris's second question is, can you walk through how weatherproof scales are in a wet winter environment? We've developed our solution. It's a powder-coated steel solution. We've developed it to work in -20 degrees and even lower. We've had these sitting outside in upstate New York, in Chicago, in the Pacific Northwest, and different up in the Great Lakes area, just sitting outside. These scales are working great. So we have not seen any problems, and it's we've designed that intentionally to work in cold weather environments. And some folks will raise some questions of, what if I get like a little bit of snow on there? Well, here's the thing. You're measuring a product that's thousands of pounds, right? Adding 2-3 pounds to it, it's not that you get a little bump in reading, it's going to affect our weight output. So that's typically not a problem for us. And so sometimes we have those questions, and it's designed into our solution. We had another question about end users directly. We work I think all of our customers today are gas distributors. In some cases, though, the gas distributor requests us to work directly with their end customer. So we will work with whoever the distributor wants us to work with. So our plan is not to work with end customers. We work directly with gas distributors and are part of the gas distribution buying groups and so forth, like IWC, AWD, and so forth.
A question from Jana Rossman. They wanted to clarify if it was -20 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius, or if it covered both.
I can take this, Sam. It's -10 Celsius. Yeah, and that's the general guidance that we've gotten from some of the components on our PCB. We haven't done tests, any structured tests below -20 C, or sorry, -10 C. We're definitely interested in trying it. And so if you do have a application, we'd love to try extreme environments. I will just say, all of our products, there's no moving parts, and there's a PCB. It's very, very simple, and so we should be able to go into extreme environments and perform well. But below -10 C, we haven't done any structured tests on yet.
Yeah, there's anecdotal, like it's sitting in refrigerators, it's sitting in outdoors in Chicago, it's sitting in upstate New York. I mean, but exactly like Dave pointed out, we would love to work with you on that.
Yeah, that's good. Cool. Looks like we answered most of the questions so far. Anybody else have anything they had questions about, even off base, or, slightly related into operations, things like that? We love operational questions because there's so many different use cases we can use for our platform. I mean, recently we even had a guy install our sensor onto their truck, and they just plugged it into the AC adapter, and it's able to remotely monitor that. So, yeah, any other questions, you can go through the chat here or through the Q&A section.
What we've noticed is our distributors are often way more, when we spend as much time as we can describing the problems that we've aimed to solve and that other distributors that we're working with are solving. And then most of the time, the most creativity, because all end customer scenarios are unique. Everyone's solving it in very unique ways, and the way that we're very happy with kind of how our product's being used across the country.
One of the guys even used one of our gateways to monitor if electricity is on or off at his location. So when our gateway goes down, it sends an alert, and he can tell when they power it off and power it back on the location. So it's a lot of different use cases there.
Chris, that's a great question. So customers have mentioned concerns about it, but then once they get, so the question was, has a customer mentioned they're concerned of snow and leaves throwing off weight? So customers have mentioned it, but the thing is that when you're talking about thousands of pounds, hundreds of pounds dewar, snow and leaves tend to be maybe less than a couple pounds total. The temperature constraints, as Dave mentioned, those typically fall well within not a concern to be for temperature. So that's usually not even a concern. And even kind of sometimes people say, oh, people put a binder, or people throw their jackets like in a restaurant environment on top of their dewars. What's that going to happen? Well, when you're looking at it and you want to make sure that you're replacing your 500 pounds of product, you want to make sure that you're replacing it at 100 pounds. Well, now you might be replacing it at 98 pounds. So that's not going to significantly affect your operation in any real noticeable way. If people are throwing bricks on top of your dewars, that's a different problem. That's going to be something you want to know about anyway. So something very heavy going on top of your gas product, you shouldn't want to happen anyway. But if people are throwing binders, jackets, things like that, it tends to not be an issue.
Yeah, and one thing to add is, this is something that we haven't seen a lot in the field. We know that everyone's concerned about it. We are watching it very closely. And because we have a machine learning backend, if we can identify what the behavior is when snow falls on it, or if somebody puts a can of tomato sauce, or whatever the problem may be, if we can identify that, then we can work to alerting the users once we find it in the data. And so, once we see it, we can build algorithms to detect it. And then when we detect it, we can reach out and say, hey, the weight has jumped up 10 pounds. Maybe you should go look at this. And so it is something that we're conscious of, we're watching. And if it does become a real problem, we will build a software solution to solve it.
And I think Chris raised another great question, scale versus DP or differential pressure on BEV carb. We think that the scale is definitely more accurate, and the scale has a degree of simplicity that DP does not have, and it's very easy to swap in and out. But DP works. DP just requires a special BEV carb tank that typically requires additional upcharge, a more expensive tank, and it also requires essentially some plumbing to basically connect our sensor, similar to what you would do in a bulk tank. We've seen most of our customers, when they're doing BEV carb, use the scale. However, there's certain places where you might have seismic activity. There might be other things in place where you would need a DP gauge, and that can work there. But yeah, I'd say more people lean towards the weight-based solution for BEV carb versus differential pressure. But both, the nice thing is we have a solution that works for both. And on both of them, you can monitor whether you choose DP or the weight scale. You can also monitor the headspace pressure as well with an additional pressure sensor there, which there's no monthly fee. It's just an additional upfront cost for the sensor. But regardless of which sensor you choose, you can monitor the headspace pressure, which I know is a common thing that folks want to do on especially BEV carb tanks, to make sure that you don't freeze up the product. I'll let Dave, do you want to talk about the benefits of head pressure a little bit more? The question came is, can you talk about the benefits of head pressure and why it's necessary?
Sure. So this is something that we didn't really anticipate. As soon as we launched our differential pressure or our level sensor, we started getting a lot of requests from customers to also do headspace. And so for us, it was really nice. The only things we had to change was software. We could use our high pressure sensor to just throw it in the top. And I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding of how people are using it is they want to know when the tank is off-gassing or blowing off pressure, because that can be an indicator of the health of the tank or an alert or indicator of how the customer is using it, using the gas, how much they're using, you know, is the system set up correctly? Do they have enough vaporization equipment? Yeah, what's the health of the tank? And so it's another piece of information in addition to just the level to let you know how the system is operating on premise so that you can remotely diagnose, is this something that I need to go spend time on and stop by or send someone out to the customer? And I think that's in the same vein as remote visibility into the levels. Is this something that I need to spend resources on to try to figure out, or is this just normal behavior? And so the nice part is that because we provide historical visualizations, you can also get some context across that location and multiple locations if you have headspace across multiple locations to understand what is normal. You know, at what pressures do your tanks typically blow off the pressure? And, you know, is one doing it much more frequently than the other?
And to answer your question, Chris, it's just a one-time fee for the headspace sensor.
Yeah, it's not a monthly fee. It's just one time. Cool. Any other questions out there? I know Chris has been asking a lot of really good ones. We just want to make sure we're able to answer any burning thoughts you guys have. Is there anybody out there as a specialized use case they're curious about or implementing? As Sam mentioned, we are currently shipping and can overnight things to anybody who needs them. We're currently, you know, working with a bunch of people that are adjusting their workflow and their operations to fit the new world that we're living in currently. And then we're also getting people sensors right now who are preparing for when it gets busy again. They're doing their installs of Pulsa, so everything's automated once they're up and running at full force again in the coming months, once we're all out of quarantine and whatnot.
And there is a lot of emergency room demand that we're supporting right now. So that's something that we're really happy about. And yeah, just I think with this webinar, we're very open to folks have specific topics that they want to discuss moving forward. We can do public webinars, but also I think off of these, we've scheduled a handful of additional just private conversations with different teams, and we can do that and just list off any questions you have, and we can make sure to cover them live. I think this is a great time to talk have folks on your sales team, have folks in operations. We can have an active conversation, kind of a meeting of the minds to figure out what the best way is to deploy the solution that works to make your business more profitable.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that too, we all understand that everybody's going through, you know, can be going through a tough time right now.
Right.
And, you know, we're
thanks everybody. I really appreciate the attendance, the active questions, the conversation we had, and we're really excited to keep everything moving forward and keep everything going. So feel free to be in touch. You'll see an email from me shortly later today with the webinar video with all the details and everything like that. And we're looking forward. This is essentially just the start of a conversation with everybody. So we're excited to keep things moving forward with everyone. So take care, be safe, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody.